Welcome to the third and final video in our series on sustainable funding for your small business, where we're going to talk about grants and donations. I cannot reiterate enough that whether you're a for-profit or nonprofit, grants cannot be your only funding strategy. If you've paid attention to the news at all, in any capacity in the last year, you know grant funding on the federal and state level has got cut significantly. And everyone's budgets are a little tighter, and grants that were already given out have been taken back. Grant funding is unpredictable. Relying on grants as a for-profit or a nonprofit is an unsustainable financial plan. You have to diversify your revenue. And if you're a for-profit, grants should be a bonus. I think our number one request at SIMBA after how do I do my state taxes or my federal taxes is there a grant available for my business? And my answer is almost always no. And I'm not trying to discourage you from running your business. They just don't exist. Even for nonprofits like SIMBA, grants are rare. Grants always require a large application. And grant writing is a skill and an art. And if you haven't done it before, don't go in blindly. Talk to someone who can help you with it. It's usually multiple pages of grant writing. I just finished a grant application and it was 22 pages. And I'm not guaranteed that money, and I've spent all the hours of my time applying for this grant. You also usually have to create a project or a service or some kind of outcome for the grant. For us, it's putting on workshops and doing trainings. So if I get a grant from the WSMA, who often funds us, I have to put on 6 workshops. And actually put on 6 workshops. I have to do so many hours of one-on-one consultations with a small business and actually do that. Otherwise, I don't get the funds. Grant funds are often not paid in advance. They are usually paid sometimes a little in advance and the last after you make your report. So you don't know if you're going to get that funding, and if you don't meet your objectives for that grant, you also aren't going to get the funding. So you may get the first portion, the 20%, but the rest of it and all the work you did, if you don't meet your goals, you may not get that funding. Some grants require you to have matching funds that you don't touch during the period of the grant. So you may apply for a $50,000 grant and you need to have $50,000 in your bank that you're not going to touch during the time period, and they're going to want bank statements to get that grant. Most grants require some kind of reporting. Sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's quarterly. Usually it's at the end of the grant. I've done grant reports anywhere from 1 page to 25 pages. You are not paid for that time. Some grants don't pay for things like staff time. They only pay for, perhaps you're a food bank and you're purchasing food to disperse, but you have to have humans to disperse it. They're not paying for your staff time, they're just paying for the food. Or they'll pay for the hourly rate of your staff person, but not their payroll taxes or their workers' comp or their benefits or all the things that actually cost to have an employee there. So you've got to figure out where you're going to get that funding from. Most of them are time limited as well. And so you've got to be able to complete a project within 3 months and then it's done. And so grants are not something we are gatekeeping at SIMBA or telling you aren't possible. Every one of our newsletters that comes out once a month on the last day of the month has grant opportunities for small businesses in there, for for-profit businesses. They are just based on the grants we see that are available. They're usually for things like the arts or an affinity grant. So a foundation that supports women-owned businesses. There was a high five grant for moms. So if you were a mom-owned business, you could apply for this grant. It's a nationwide grant. They get 50,000 applicants for 5 grants of $500 each. So the odds of you also receiving the grant are pretty low. So again, grants for-profit businesses outside of technology and research spaces, which is a lot of grant funding from, especially in medical funding, particularly related to addiction treatment right now. That's really common for funders to want to provide that funding. Those are available. The other caveat about grants as well is that funders want to know who has funded you in the past, who you've had grants from in the past, who you've had government contracts with in the past, because they're going to check your references. They want to know you did what you said you were going to do with the money. They're going to call those people. They're going to see your prior grant reports. So another reason that it's really hard for-profit businesses to receive grants is because you don't have a history of doing grant-funded projects. There are occasionally opportunities to receive a grant for a for-profit if you have a fiscal sponsor, meaning you have a 501c3 that will apply for the grant with you. They receive a portion of the funds, they take a small fee, and you get the funding. But that's going to be for a project that's time limited or specific to a region. So perhaps you're an entity that does camps for kids and you're for-profit and you want to do a STEM summer camp. There might be funding available for that if you partner with a nonprofit willing to be your fiscal sponsor. They're going to take a fee, so anywhere from 5 to 20%. But that is a possibility, but I really want to encourage for-profit businesses, especially in retail spaces and food services, to not think about grants as anything other than a lucky bonus if you got one. And even honestly for nonprofits now, getting a grant that's purely operational, you can use the money on whatever you want, is wildly rare and highly competitive. So think about other funding strategies for your for and nonprofit business. Again, I love a free photo. So Cary Grant, this is a free photo of him. There's a lot of not free photos of Cary Grant that you can purchase from things like Getty Images. Again, they're project specific. They're restricted as to what you can use it for. Some grants say things like you can buy coffee for a meeting, but you can't buy food. Or you can buy coffee from a coffee shop, but you can't buy creamers from the grocery store. They can be very specific. So again, they're very limited. They're time limited. You've got to run your program from January 16th to June 10th. And that is almost exactly the dates from a prior grant I ran, not even lining up with a month. They are region and mission specific. Funders have the money. They are foundations who get to fund what they want. They will tell you what their mission is. They will tell you who they're going to fund and where they're going to fund that money. Again, almost only available for 501c3s or things like schools. Schools get a lot of grants. They're not standalone 501c3s, but K through 12, public and private, and then institutions of higher education get a lot of grant funding. Higher ed specifically because they're in research and science spaces. And so most of the research projects at universities are funded through grants. You can sometimes be another kind of nonprofit or for-profit applying with a fiscal sponsor. So the example of that is a C6. 501c6 is a business association. So it's the Association of Defense Attorneys, for example. That is a made-up one. They have a different name. But they're a C6. You're paying to go to events, get professional networking, things like that, but they're not a C3. They generally can't apply for grants either, even though they're nonprofits. So they could partner with the nonprofit, like I said, in the fiscal sponsorship model. And the other thing about grants is they're often not renewable. You get the grant for that chunk of time, and some funders won't let you ever apply for their grant funding again. Some funders are very clear that we are going to fund you one time and one time only. Some let you apply again after a period of years. Some let you apply all the time, may or may not fund you regularly. And so that's something you need to know. If you get $5,000 for a grant, you may not get it again because either they won't fund you again, or they have a waiting period, or they try to, whether they tell you or not, fund different organizations every time. So grants are wild. Grants are the Wild West. And if you're not in the nonprofit space or in tech or research and occasionally the arts, there are some pretty interesting arts grants in the city of Spokane. Spokane Arts does really cool grant funding, but otherwise you've got to find one of these other methods to fund your business. A little more on grants, that's Ulysses S. Grants. Grants are occasionally for general operations, meaning you can spend what you want. You can pay your rent, you can pay your insurance, you can do your payroll taxes. Pretty rare. Sometimes they're renewable, and again, sometimes for-profits in tech and research. Like I mentioned, we do highlight grants in our newsletter. It is free to subscribe. It is via email. You don't even have to read the whole thing. You can click on the link at the top that says grants. You can skip my executive director letter, which will make me sad, and just go to the grants, but I'll never know. There have been grants for things like journalists, for people in rural communities, running small businesses. There was a grant for Black-owned businesses. Again, these are just what is available and what we see, and we share them with the greater audience. There may not be a grant available for your for-profit or your nonprofit. Grants always require an application. Sometimes they are very long, like I mentioned, 20 pages. And we're talking 20 narrative pages where you're typing it out. And grant funders know if you've used AI They are looking for that and screening for that, just like college professors are, and they will put your application at the bottom of the barrel. I am often a grant reviewer for different entities, and if you don't answer all the questions or you've got a bunch of typos, your scores are pretty low generally from a grant funding perspective as well. So you have to have someone who can write well and answer the call of the question. There's always some kind of report. It can be very short. It's pretty rare. One of my grant funders just said, I want photos of the project. I have never seen a grant report like that, and we gave them 20 photos of what we did in this project. That is the outlier. Usually it is some quantitative data. How many people did you serve? What did you do? How many pounds of food did you give out? How many kids did you teach about STEM? How many people did you keep out of incarceration and help find jobs? Whatever those numbers are, they're going to want to know. And then narrative data, paragraphs and paragraphs about the impact of your project on the community you applied for, and tracking. And if you're not good at details, or you're the person who says, oh, I don't understand the finances, and you hire out, know that tracking for grants and government contracts, which are often styled as grants, is very detailed, and you have to keep your records for a long time. And if you don't have a good CRM or customized reports or really extensive spreadsheets, even Access versus Excel, you're gonna have a hard time being successful as a for-profit or nonprofit receiving grants. Where do you find them? Grants Cafe, I don't know where this is. It could be in Grants Pass, maybe. It could be in Grant County. You can find grants, federal grants at grants.gov. You can register to receive notices based on your kind of business. Most government grants, well, most of them have been unfunded recently, but most government grants are really government contracts, and you have to be a pretty sophisticated bidder to apply for these. A lot of them require a lot of pre-planning and meetings and things to get there. I have never seen a government grant from the federal government, which is what grants.gov is, for a for-profit business outside of tech, research, or construction, occasionally construction, because the government doesn't make or build anything. So when the government is building something, they have to hire a contractor. State and local government department websites. City of Spokane, for example, has a grants portal on their page. I think the only grant they have available right now is a public safety grant in conjunction with the police department. And those things are going to vary. There are sometimes grants on the Department of Commerce's website through the state of Washington. In Washington, if you're looking for grants and contracts, WEBS, W-E-B-S, is a website that aggregates those. You can register to receive notice for government contracts or grants. There are government contracts for for-profit businesses in all kinds of areas. They hire everything in parts of state and local governments in Washington, from cleaning services to construction to snowplows, videographers, caterers, all kinds of things. It varies by community, but again, they're government, they don't make or build anything, so they have to hire out janitorial services. It's going to vary by location. City of Spokane, for example, does not hire janitorial services or catering, but other cities do. So WEBS is the space where you can sign up to get that information. There are grant aggregator sites like GrantWatch or GrantStation. They are subscription-based softwares that aggregate data. There's no guarantee you're going to find a grant. They all have different fees. GrantStation is north of $500 a year. GrantWatch is about $200 a year. Our newsletter, again, will highlight grants for you. If you're a SIMBA member at certain levels, we'll do free grant searches for you or low-cost grant searches for you. Again, no promise. In Spokane, for arts, the Saga grants are available. The beauty of the Saga grants as well is that they will help you with your grant application. I have never heard of another funder who helps you with your grant application. So that's something to know. There are some grants through the end of 2026 through the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation. If your business is in Perry, Garland, Hilliard, or North Monroe. And then always look to a professional grant writer, at least for advice if you're applying for a grant. We can happily send you some recommendations. Again, it is an art and a science, and if writing isn't your strong suit, it's going to be hard for you to get a grant no matter how good your project is. Thank you for watching the third video in our series on funding your small business. If you missed videos 1 and 2, they're linked here on our YouTube.